Not too long ago, you guys may remember me taking a look at e.o.n's GCHD, an HDMI adapter for the Gamecube. At the time, I was impressed as hell, and even now, this bad boy has stayed in heavy rotation in my gaming setup. From upscaling Gamecube games with the FrameMeister to using the Game Boy interface software for a crisp 240p out of my Game Boy player, this little guy has worked wonders for me. Well, e.o.n seems to not be too keen with resting on their laurels. The GCHD Mark II adds some cool features over the original, most importantly, a component video output, leaving us with one question: is the Mark II a worthy successor to such a cool piece of tech? Well, I'm Jared, and this is Avalanche Reviews. Before we get down to the nitty-gritty, we gotta take care of some boring stuff. While e.o.n did provide this GCHD Mark II for the purposes of this review, this isn't some type of paid advertisement. I'm under no obligation to say anything positive about this thing, and no one's checking this video before it goes up. Alright, so now that that's over with, let's take a look at how the Mark II looks, which, as you can see, is almost identical to its predecessor. We still have the same Gamecube analog and digital connectors here, and around the side we have the HDMI out. Here on the back is where most of the new features come into play with the newest edition analog video out. This port makes use of the relatively inexpensive Wii component cables, which means you can live out your dream of Gamecube component video without taking out a second mortgage to get your hands on one of these bad boys. Right next to this, we have an audio out port that makes use of your typical 3.5mm connector with two purposes in mind. This means you could say have a pair of headphones hooked up or even a mini Toslink cable, or as it's better known, digital optical audio. Just like the last GCHD products, it's only going to work with the digital out ports that can be found on first-gen Gamecubes. And as a quick update, the problem I had with the last GCHD being a bit too snug for my liking is no longer an issue. The Mark II slides in with ease, but still feels like it's firmly in place. Another issue I had with the GCHD was not really liking the look of an HDMI cable coming out the side of my Gamecube. And while the HDMI connector's in the same spot, using component cables makes sure my OCD goes unprovoked. But you guys didn't come here for an aesthetic overview, so let's jump into some footage of the Mark II doing its thing. Now last time I wanted to keep upscaling out of the video, but this time let's go all out and see just how good this thing can look. I'll be using the FrameMeister to scale the Mark II's output to 1080p, and if you're wondering what connector type, internal resolution, or settings I'm using, keep an eye on the lower left hand corner. Just like the GCHD before it, the Mark II does not fail at delivering some jaw-dropping Gamecube video. If you're like me and haven't really touched Nintendo's little purple box since composite video cables and a CRT was the most cutting edge you can get, you'll probably catch yourself saying on multiple occasions, "Damn, I just do not remember this console looking that good." Thanks to the direct nature of the Cube's digital out port, the Mark II can offer some really attractive features. Since there's no digital to analog conversion going on, you'll find incredibly accurate colors and a lack of any and all lag while using HDMI. When using the analog video out, you're essentially at the mercy of your TV, upscaler, or whatever you have your component connection plugged into. The good news is I noticed absolutely no lag whatsoever when using component cables plugged into the FrameMeister, but then again, I'm not exactly sensitive to that kind of stuff. The options menu on the Mark II seems to have had a bit of an overhaul, with a little more fine-tuning available and separate settings for each supported resolution. Align double mode is still available for games that don't support 480p, which is sadly a majority of GC games, and I'm still fairly lukewarm on the idea of this style of deinterlacing. I mean, it does a great job at getting rid of combing artifacts, but close inspection will reveal some noticeable wobbliness depending on how close you are to your display. In all fairness, this is a side effect of the bob deinterlacing method and not something specific to the Mark II, but I'm still not sure I like it. Kinda on the fence. The good news is you may not have to worry about this. With a cheap SD card reader and an action replay disc, you can take advantage of the homebrew software Swiss, which among many other things allows you to force 480p on any Gamecube game. Of the 14 or so games I tested, only the first-person shooter 13 refused to run in progressive scans, so I'm assuming you can expect some pretty positive results. Here you can see each of these options side by side. On the left we have the raw 480i, and right next to that the exact same 480i but line doubled using GCHD. It's definitely an improvement, but the wobbliness is pretty evident. Next to that is 480p forced with Swiss, and I think I speak for all of us when I say we have ourselves a very clear winner. Just look at how sharp and clear that is. I mean, it's a damn crime that Resident Evil 0 and most other GameCube games didn't support 480p officially. Now, I don't want to sound like I'm coming down too hard on Bob deinterlacing. I mean, don't get me wrong, line doubling is a great way to get a progressive scan image out of the cube for those of you unwilling to use the Framemeister's adapted deinterlacing or Swiss, but I just couldn't help but be blown away at the amazing quality the Mark II can achieve when paired with this free piece of software. Okay, so if you're anything like me, the first thing you thought when you heard both analog and digital out was, man, I can't wait to compare those signals. Or maybe you're a normal, well-adjusted person, and that was the furthest thing from your mind. Either way, let's compare, shall we? Here on the left we have the Sonic collection at 480p via HDMI, and on the right we have Component. As you can see, the HDMI signal is the sharpest of the two, which is no real surprise. There's no digital to analog conversion taking place, so that'll be the purest picture, but if we switch over to a 3D game, you might also notice some ringing artifacts on the HDMI side as well. That's that faint, nearly transparent line coming off the edge of Mario's pants here. At first, I thought this was my Framemeister over-sharpening the picture, so I plugged the Mark II directly into my capture card, and sure enough, there's that same ringing artifact. After seeing this, I contacted the guys at e.o.n, and they told me there was no processing whatsoever going on before the HDMI signal leaves their adapter, which means this must be a flaw with the GC video standard. Hey guys, I had to throw this part in post-edit since some new info's come to light. Thanks to the killer work that My Life in Gaming has done, I've recently found out that there are some serious quirks with Gamecube video output, even when using the pure signal from the digital port. Apparently, the colors blue and red are specifically affected by the cube using a compressed 422 color space. Now, I'm not sure that this explains the artifacts I'm seeing on some edges, since it shouldn't protrude outside the boundaries of those two colors, but going back to the Mario example, I noticed that whatever this is seems to be localized around Mario's blue pants and doesn't show up outside of his white gloves, so we didn't exactly solve this mystery, but at least we know it's not the fault of implementing GC video. The good news is, this little issue is made nearly undetectable with good settings, and if you're not using this with any type of scaler, I doubt you'll ever need to worry about this anyways. Pure 480p from this device looks amazing, but it's a little too soft for small video flaws like this to ever be noticeable. I'm not too sure, but I think I'm going to stick with component output in my setup. It's a lot more convenient since I recently got myself an Extron Cross Point with a whopping 12 inputs and 8 outputs, plus I kinda just enjoy the softer look of analog video. The simultaneous outputs on the Mark II made this decision remarkably easy to make, which I really have to praise e.o.n for. I had both analog and digital video going into my TV at the same time, and switching between the two was as simple as hitting one button on the Framemeister's remote control. I imagine Smash players wanting the familiarity of a CRT but also wanting to record or stream their matches are gonna love this feature, but that's not exactly what has me excited. Yeah, you knew we weren't wrapping up this video without touching on this. Thanks to the Game Boy player and a piece of software called the Game Boy Interface, the Mark II lets me pull a beautifully crisp 240p picture from my GBA games, and man, this is still my absolute favorite use for this thing. I've always really loved the Game Boy Advance, and getting to see these games and their amazing sprite art blown up on my TV will just never get old. Sadly, I still don't have a better way to play these games than the Wavebird controller, which isn't exactly ideal, but even that can't bring down this objectively awesome experience. Which brings us to the real question here. Is the Mark II a worthy successor to the GCHD? And in my opinion, the answer is, without a doubt, yes, 100%. The original GCHD was already a killer deal, letting me finally see both my Gamecube and GBA games in pristine quality, and the Mark II is the exact same product, just with a ridiculous amount of new features. The addition of analog video and audio out is nice, but being able to use all three at the same time is just too damn cool. I mean, e.o.n could have easily just sat back and profited from their hard work on the GCHD, but instead they went out and added about every feature anyone had ever asked for, and the kicker is, they're selling the Mark II for the exact same $150 price tag as the original. If you ask me, this is an incredible price to performance ratio. If any of you guys are YouTube content creators, streamers, or just retro video aficionados, the GCHD Mark II is an absolute must-have. And with that, I gotta get out of here, but make sure to stick around because I will be back soon. And as usual, I'm Jared. And this is Avalanche Reviews. Hey guys, thanks for watching. As you've noticed, I don't do a lot of hardware reviews here, but after this, I've kind of found that I enjoy the process. Let me know down in the comment section if this is something you'd like to see more of, and maybe think about stopping by my Patreon page to bankroll getting my hands on some more sweet retro video tech to include here on the channel. Well, thanks again guys, and I'll see all of you next time.